All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome in. I am your host, V. Bailey, and we are streaming live here with the HBCU Lounge Network. And I'm ready for this important conversation that we're going to have tonight with our wonderful guest. And I can't believe that we're almost done with women's this season on women's healing. This is our second to last episode. Next week will be our last episode of women's healing. So I thank you all for just hanging in there and being, a part of the conversation, and just taking the opportunity to, improve your own healing. So thank you so much for that. And before we actually get into the show, I want to take this opportunity to remind you, if you have a YouTube channel, go ahead and log in so that you can be a part of the conversation and add your questions to the chat, so that our panelists can answer any questions, as well as if you want to at some point come on and ask your question on the screen, or just not even turning your camera on, but just to ask your question. We will share the link in the chat about partway through. Just let us know, and we will bring you up so that you can join us and ask your question. So, again, thank you so much. Well, this evening, this show is about Black motherhood and getting the health care that we need and deserve for the mothers, and for Black women who want to be mothers at some point, and just also to kind of learn about the healthcare system and some of the disparities with it. And so glad that you all are here to join in this conversation. And also go ahead and share while it's still early into the show. Share this with any loved ones or friends, or just anyone who needs to, hear this conversation. So thank you so much. And I want to go ahead and introduce our guests that we have this evening for episode 10. First, but surely not least, we have Miss Jelana Woodruff. And I'm going to go ahead and let you take it away. Let the people know who you are.
Hello, everyone, and hi, V. Thank you for having me. I am
Yeah.
Jelana Woodruff. I am currently a certified physician assistant. I have been working as a PA in Fresno, California for the last coming up on 12 years. And I work for an OBGYN. The majority of my career has been with women's health and an OBGYN focus. And I am just really happy to be here to learn from all of you and to share it with you all.
Sorry about that.
That's
There's
okay.
no background noise. Yes, so next we have one of the members of Raising Resilience. We have Miss Tiffany Bishop. And Tiffany, if you can let them know who you are and what it is that you do.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having Whitney and I be. I am Tiffany Bishop. I am one of the founders of Raising Resilience, which is a maternal mental health practice. So we provide therapy to women and families who are transitioning into parenthood, who are wanting to conceive but struggling with maybe infertility, pregnant families, families who've experienced loss. And so Whitney and I together have been doing this for about 2 years in our private practice, but we have been mental health therapists for about 10 years.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yes, awesome. And so, Miss Whitney, did you want to add to that?
I think Tiffany did a wonderful job at introducing us. I think she kind of went over what we do, who
Mhm.
we serve, and kind of like our licensure. So she did a phenomenal job.
Perfect, perfect, perfect. And last but not least, we have Miss Darlene.
Hi, everyone. My name is Darlene Niara. I'm a holistic health coach certified, also an author and a personal trainer. And I'm just excited to be here to learn from everyone. I had a home birth. I'm from New York. And I'm just super excited because I think that, it being Women's Month, this is so important for us to kind of dive
Mhm.
into and to talk about. So I'm so, so honored to be here.
Yes, and that worked out perfect because I didn't remember that it was Women's Month until, March 1st. So it worked out. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for being here for this important discussion. And so, with Black Americans, having such a crucial role in building this country, and also contributing to the healthcare system, like women like Henrietta Lacks, who they've used her sales for major medical breakthroughs with vaccines and different treatments. It saddens me that we receive some of the poorest treatment, and especially, Black women. Unfortunately, Black women, Black mothers in this country pay the ultimate price, with their lives. And after doing a little research for the show, I got an opportunity to watch a TED Talk with Wanda Irving, and she spoke on how the U.S. Fails Black mothers. And I learned of the horrific statistics that feed into the systematic disparities, which result in Black women dying at rates almost 300% higher than white women. And according to AmericanProgress.org, the United States is home to stark and persistent racial disparities in health coverage, chronic health conditions, mental health, and mortality. This season, we're focusing on women's healing, and I wanted to shed some light on this topic. One, because so many of us don't know that, or didn't know that. I've learned a lot, about it recently. In the recent years, and then a little bit more before this show. And so I thought it was important for us to have this conversation so that we're aware of the different options that we have instead of just taking it lying down and just being an advocate for ourselves. So, yes, again, thank you so much for being here. And so I want to go ahead and get into our questions. And again, to the audience, if you all have questions at any point, you just be sure to just throw your questions in the chat, and we'll, go ahead and get to that. And if you would like to come on, we will also drop the link, the StreamYard link in the chat as well. So thank you. Thank you. So ladies, can you speak to your own experience with the healthcare system and the structural racism? Did that motivate you to get into healthcare and wellness, especially for Darlene? Jelana?
Yes. Okay. So I guess I'll go first.
Yes. I'm
All
sorry.
right. No,
I
that's
know sometimes you're like, switch it up, switch
okay.
it up.
So, my own experience is probably not unique to myself. It definitely I grew up, so my mother is an OBGYN.
Mhm,
And so I grew up with kind of, hearing the stories from the back end on just women's
mhm,
health, women's issues, deliveries, and things like that. And so I've always been around medicine. But, I noticed even as a patient, it was like the care that you'd receive, not being listened to,
mhm,
having to over explain things only to be kind of pacified or,
mhm,
almost just feeling like you're being kind of patronized at times.
mhm,
It was always very frustrating. I remember when I was even in high school, I used to get really bad chest pain. So I played sports, and
mhm,
whenever I'd run and play, I'd get severe palpitations where you could actually see my heart beating through my clothing, and I'd have
mhm,
chest pain. And I went to doctors for years and years and years, and they were like, "Oh, it's just asthma. We can't find anything wrong." And it
mhm,
wasn't until my pediatrician was actually out of town and there was an on-call doctor, whoever was filling in for her. And they were like, "Oh, well, let's just check your thyroid." And it's like, okay, that sounds simple. When someone's having
mhm,
palpitations, that should be one of the first things. And naturally, like, my thyroid was out of control, and and it was something that could have been detected years prior, but it was just, young Black girl, you're young,
Mhm.
shouldn't be an issue,
Mm.
and not getting the care. And so that always kind of stayed in the back of my mind. Then when I had my own children, especially my firstborn, my son, I did have preeclampsia. I was induced
Mm.
early, a tough labor, and postpartum depression, the whole 9 yards.
Oh.
Then even when he was an infant, he was sick all the time, to the point where I was
Mm.
constantly going to Valley Children's ER because his fevers would be, at one point it was 107 degrees, 106.5 degrees, like these extremely high fevers. And I was
Mhm.
living at the doctor's and getting no
Mm.
answers. And so
Wow.
I was just at the point where I was like, I need to honestly go back to school so that I can educate myself, because I need to know what's going on. I feel like I'm not being told everything things should be being done that aren't being done. And
Right.
so that was kind of a catalyst for me to want to not only be able to understand medicine a little bit better, just so that I can get the care that I deserve, my family deserve, and Black people in general deserve. But I also wanted to be able to provide that service to other people. So.
Awesome. Thank you. I mean, that's so scary because just to, when you don't know, right? But then
Right.
once you get that, that first initial moment when you figure out something's wrong and I'm like, these people may not be giving me the proper care, it's just like, okay, I have to do something about it. It's like, what do I do? Where do I go?
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm glad that you did something about it. Got it beforehand. Um, well, I'll go to Whitney, just because of what you guys do. I'm sure you guys have your different stories of what brought you to creating Raising Resilience, but also even just getting in the field. So, Whitney, if you can go first and tell us a little bit of did your experience, any particular experience, motivate you to get into the medical field?
I think for me, having someone very close to me that dealt with mental health, I think
Mhm.
early on I saw the disparities that there are for Black women and Black males when it comes to us getting the care that we deserve. I grew up in a very small town, so
Mm.
there was slim pickings when it came to
Mm.
finding a medical provider or mental health provider that looked like you, understood you, and listened to you
Mm.
versus just looking like what you were on paper.
Right.
So for me, I got into the mental health field because I knew there's a distinct kind of bridge between mental health and the medical perspective. But when you
Mhm.
think about it, if your mental health needs aren't being met, and then medically, if your needs aren't being met, you're just in a disarray. And I think a lot of times for Black women, we get in that space where we're just sick and tired because things
Mhm.
aren't being addressed and it impacts our mental health. So for
Mhm.
me, it's just being able to provide relatable care, there's quality care for people that look like me. I don't want people
Mhm.
to go in feeling like, well, I'm not going to hear anything, or it's just going to be
Mhm.
one thing after next. So I think for me, that's what pushed me to really go into the mental health field.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it gets those initial, that bringing your walls down when you see someone who looks like you. I think that there's a part of us that's kind of like, okay, well, they look like me, that, they're going to, get it, possibly, they'll give me better care, which, they say that is what happens. So, thank you so much for sharing. And Tiffany.
Yeah, so I got into the mental health field. I used to be a teacher, and I was working at this Title I school, low resources, um, and I noticed that the children really weren't prioritizing what was going on in the classroom because they lack resources outside of the classroom. And so I wanted to be able to meet their needs in another way, because teaching wasn't really getting through because that wasn't their priority at that time. And so I went to the mental health field. I started off working with children, adolescents, and then quickly learned that in order for me to be able to really make change or help propel these children forward, that I needed to like start working with the families and the parents, and especially the mothers. And then in 2017, I became a mother, and Whitney and I went to this training hosted by Postpartum Support International, where we were just learning. We wanted to focus on teenage mothers. And then, so we went to this training, and it was about perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And being therapists for, a few years at that time, we were like, what? Who said this? Like, where does this come from? All of the trainings, all of the coursework we've done, we've never heard anything outside of like postpartum. And so it put things in perspective for me, with my own birthing experience. And I'm like, me, a trained mental health professional, didn't know any of this information. Like, how many other people are experiencing the same thing? How many other people are going through this and not knowing what it is, and that there is treatment and help for it? Right. And so that, along with our experiences working with children and their families, kind of like really pushed us into founding Raising Resilience and focusing on women's mental health, and specifically maternal mental health.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And Darlene, can you share about your experience and, what got you into being a health coach and, doing what you do, writing? You said you are author as well. So, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So very similar to what everyone has shared. It's like you want to see yourself in the pages of the textbooks that you're reading. You want to see yourself when you walk into the doctor's office. You want to be able to kind of relate to just whoever is supposed to be serving you, right? And so my original background is actually a professional dancer. And I was training 7 days a week, working that 9 to 5, living that NYC life, waitressing on the side, hustling and auditioning on the opposite side, of the spectrum. But I realized that I was also really just not eating properly. I wasn't checking in with my body. And every time I went to the emergency room, or whenever I had to just, check in on my body, I would get just very, very unprofessional comments. And I'll say that it wasn't always the case, but whenever I came in with any kind of injury, it wasn't taken seriously. I remember one time, and I had an experience where my knee was completely swollen. I didn't know what was going on. And the nurse just looked at me and said, well, stop dancing. And just like rolled her eyes. And it was just like, whatever, this isn't an emergency. So therefore, you can just walk away. And, it wasn't until then where I really, really began to just become super passionate about educating myself. And that also, is what also led me to, which I'll talk about a little later, is why I had my home birth, because I truly felt like I wanted an experience that I felt like I would not only learn from and experience, but that I can also teach other women how to be comfortable with having something like a home birth, and feeling educated and feeling empowered, and having everyone in the room look like you and feel safe and feel welcomed. So I'm super passionate about my health coaching work, because it allows me to not only just tap into men and women and different walks of life who are looking to transform their bodies and transform their mindset, but I also work from a habits building approach, where we not only look at, what your external goals are, but how are we going to get to that based on different habits that we can start implementing into your life. And so since I became a mother in 2021, I've now created a division of my company that allows me to work with women that are in the prenatal phase, but also in postpartum, so that they feel empowered and feel inspired to take care of themselves. From a very holistic standpoint.
Oh, that's so awesome. I love it. I love all you. I love how your stories, like, from some bad experience, you all were able to turn it into something positive, and then impact, kind of like a domino effect, be able to impact so many other people's lives. And I think that's the beauty within the mess. I always say that there's always beauty within the mess. And it's just, it's nice that that's what birthed, from it as well. So thank you so much for sharing. So Jelana, I wanted to ask you first, especially since you're physician's assistant, just in general with healthcare, have you noticed a change in the care, for Black people, Black women, mothers, that they're receiving? Because I read something that, there's a percentage that believe that it's changed, it's improved. And then there's a large percent that believe that no change has happened, so.
Okay. I can say, at least since the pandemic and everything with George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, I have seen in the last probably 2 to 3 years improvements. It seems like there is a greater focus on improving Black maternal morbidity, mortality rates, Black infant, like reducing the morbidity, mortality rates there. There's different programs that are now starting to spring up. The government and people are paying more attention, and there's more communication about it. So we as Black women are more aware. But also there's specific programs that are designed just to support us during our pregnancies. At least here in Fresno County, we're very blessed to have a program called the Black Infant Health Program, which I learned about several years ago. They came to our office and they were teaching us about the program so that we could send our Black women there, just to kind of walk alongside and offer that social and that community support throughout the pregnancy and postpartum period, as well as connecting Black women with mental health professionals, and just having that, like even with the prenatal and even the infant care, pediatric care and things like that, just to kind of reduce the impact. Okay. Working as a Black provider for a Black provider and taking care of Black women, the sad part is, even though these programs and services are there, unfortunately, a lot of non-Black providers don't see the need for it still, or they just don't, trying to prove that Black lives indeed do matter, that Black women matter, that our children matter, to a society that has historically been taught that we don't matter, that we are less than, and that, we simply should just be able to be grateful and content with whatever we're given. And having the same mentality that's just kind of ingrained caring for us and our children, we do see the higher rates of like even pediatrics, like the infant deaths. I read a statistic that, infants being cared for by white physicians die at a rate, Black infants cared for by white physicians die at a 3 times higher rate than if they were cared for by a Black physician. And it's just, there's plenty of speculation as to the reasons behind that, but having to combat historical racism and just the thinking that Black people are not human, having to prove our humanity to receive care, it's disgraceful and it's unacceptable. And so even with these programs, I think if we have more Black providers and if we have, just more knowledge, even what we're doing with talks like these, just educating Black people of the need for seeing someone who does indeed look like you, or at least is aware of these disparities and actively working to, combat them, it's crucial. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, it just made me think about not that long ago. I think it was a few months back where they had that. It wasn't here; it was in Europe somewhere, and there was a nurse who had basically got away with killing like 7 or 8 babies because she was putting saline or something in the babies. I don't know if it was in the formula or what it is that they were she was doing, but a nurse, and they were like, we noticed that these babies were dying basically on her watch, and they don't really know how many she actually, killed, but it's just like, what? I don't know. To me, it's just like, how are these things going on? Like, I don't know. It's just so far fetched from, when you're not like that, you just don't think that this kind of thing is going on, but it is. So, Tiffany, Tiffany and Whitney, I would like for you guys to kind of just, share about that in you all's work. What have you all seen? Have you seen a change? And Tiffany, you can go first, and then wait.
So I have seen a change in the Black community being more open to receiving mental health, right? Like now this has become a conversation and a topic that we are discussing. You know, a lot of our peers, like who do this work with us, we notice that they too are really targeting their audience to Black men and women, right? To be able to change this narrative that mental health is not like us. A problem in our community. Yeah. Like we don't have the right to be able to care for our mental health because we are so resilient, we're so strong, and we've just learned to persevere through all the difficult things that have been thrown at us. So I will say that I have seen a shift in our community being more open to receiving mental health. And that's things like, you know, Therapy for Black Girls, you know, that platform does a lot to kind of like disseminate information and provide resources for Black women. And then I think there's another organization called like Black Men Deserve or something. I can't remember the name.
There's a couple of things. I get excited every time I see it. Progress.
Exactly. I've definitely seen a shift in that. And as far as like in the maternal mental health world, in the perinatal mental health, not so much as like providers, but I'm sure Whitney can talk like about that because that's where we see like a lot of lack of diversity.
I think the shift, I think sometimes me and Tiffany have to step outside of our little world of maternal mental health because in our world, it's making a big dynamic shift.
Right.
But I know for others who are not aware of, because a lot of times people just say maternal health, but maternal health encompasses maternal mental health too. So I think a lot of times me and Tiffany, we serve Black women. And there's a reason why we serve Black women, but we get a lot of pushback. We get nasty emails. We get people that want to know, why do you only serve Black women? Why is this space solely for Black women? What does that look like? Why are Black women so special to when it's not a privilege? This came from where we saw a disparity. And I always say we're making a shift when it comes to disparities because disparities mean that one race or inclusive people are getting a level of care and one is not.
Right.
So that we choose Black women over a certain other group of women, but there's a disparity. There are women receiving quality care. There are women that their providers speak to them about what postpartum depression looks like, what this looks like. And then there's women that come in and there's not a word spoken to them about what postpartum even looks like. It's just sign this form, you're out of here, and I'll see you later. And I think another thing that I want to see a shift in is the more that me and Tiffany push this narrative of we need providers that look like us, I want people to not forget, I don't want Black providers burnt out. Because one of the things I learned is we get burnt out quickly because we want to see. And I don't want that either. Like we can't all do the work. We need providers that don't look like us to put in some work too, because don't burn us out in the effort to save and make maternal mental health care or maternal health prominent, but we need everybody else to learn how do you even acknowledge someone, even the way you speak to someone when they come into a room, ask them to touch them when you need to. Those small things impact people's care. So I think the shift is being made, but it can't be all on our backs either as Black providers.
Absolutely. Well, that makes me think of something like about how can you identify that? Because you made such a great point. And, you know, just watching like reality shows, I watch Married to Medicine and stuff. And, you know, when the George Floyd, you know, stuff was going on, and then you seen like different trainings that were happening. Everybody was just like, oh, supporting Black businesses. I'm like, my whole existence, I've never seen ever on TV that they're saying we stand with you when they were standing with every single other race, but I never seen it for us. And so I said, wow, like I just didn't think a day would come, you know, and it still was not it's not its best, but that was something new. But then that also made all Black, healthcare providers booked. There was book child, and so, thank you for bringing that up. The fact that, yeah, it's not all on you guys. So, just on the Black healthcare providers, so that you're not getting burnt out. We need to see a change throughout the entire, system with other race doctors, right? Because they're still seeing a majority of the patients. So yeah, so so that was my point. Like, how will they, if you guys could say, or give some type of advice of how they would be able to identify if it isn't a different race provider, like what should they look for to know that they can trust that doctor or see them or allow them to provide them care?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what we talk about when we are like putting this topic like on a platform and trying to get everyone to pay attention is that a key indicator that a provider is going to like help you in the ways that you need is like genuinely how they make you feel, right? Like, do you feel heard and listened to? Are your concerns validated? Are you reaffirmed? Oftentimes, like, I know like microaggressions could get real tricky, and we like, did she really, like, what just happened here, right? And so like, if you feel that, that's a good indicator that, yeah, she's not for you, because the provider who is for you, she or he is not for you, because the provider who is for you is going to make you feel affirmed, make you feel seen, make you feel heard and understood. And they're going to be so patient with you and reflect back. Doctors have this level of education that maybe another individual does not have. And so having these conversations on the patient's or client's level, right? Not talking above them, not assuming that they don't understand, asking for clarity, and just essentially making you feel safe. And I think that's an internal thing that we can feel.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, one of the things me and Tiffany always say is like, when you're searching for a provider, whether it's medical, gynecologist, OB/GYN, any of that, mental health, like, view it as like your life depends on it. Because as Black women, our life do depend on it, because we go into birth so many times. Like, like when my friends are pregnant, I'm always thinking like, I want them to make it out. Like, like I don't like no other race probably thinks about that when a family member, sister, or their partner is about to have birth, that I just want them to live. I don't.
They just get to celebrate.
Yeah, like we go into that. So I always say, like, do consultations. If you get a provider and they're like, no, I don't do that. I'm not, or they don't have time. Like, I've had clients, they're like, well, the provider acted like they didn't have time to do a consultation with me. Move on. Like, you don't have to be stuck with a provider because that's all that's left. You don't have to feel pushed around. If it's something you don't like, it's okay to move to another provider. I don't care if you're 8 months. Move to someone else. So don't put yourself under stress just to say I have a provider. Like, and also think about the leverage of technology. Like, we have apps like Health in Her Hue. We have the Earth app, the WOMI app. Like, those are apps where you literally can log on and see ratings of providers in your area. So use technology. We use it for everything else. So use it for your health and your mental health. Like, you can even have mental health providers that are on there that you can rate and see. So I always say, like Tiffany said, after an appointment, whether it's a therapist or a medical provider, ask yourself, how did I feel? If there's anything that you feel that you don't like and you can't bring it up in that next appointment. And if you're still feeling some kind of way, move on. You are not, we see so many Black women that stay with providers because they're just like, well, at least I got someone. I don't want you operating from that space. Like, you have power in your choice when it comes to your health and your mental health.
Well, it's interesting because they stay in life as well in other areas, and so it's kind of bleeding over into the areas that this is most important: your health and your mental health. It's like, we're not just settling like for just cause, like absolutely not.
And I think something too, like a good question to ask, like when we are looking for these providers, is like being able to be upfront about the statistics, right? Like, I know that these are the statistics for Black women giving birth, or
That's right.
so what are some things like how are you able to kind of help me navigate that, or what is a plan that we can come up with to prevent from me being one of those
One
statistics,
of those
right?
statistics. Yeah.
And just really learning how to advocate for ourselves, like Whitney was saying, knowing that like just
Mm.
because they're with health providers, there's kind of like this power dynamic where you think
Mm-hmm.
that this person knows more than you, but you know yourself best, right?
Yeah.
And so they're just here to kind of like help guide you and facilitate you with their expertise, but you are
Mm-hmm.
the expert on yourself.
Mm. Yes, I love that. And just being able to be bold about that unapologetically, because this is your life, and your child, life, So that's so important. Just hey, I'm aware of, of these things, how are you going to be able to support me? Like it's an interview. Let's
Yeah.
just keep it real.
I would even add too,
Yeah.
not being afraid to get a second opinion. Like if somebody tells you something
Mm.
that you just doesn't sit right with you, or if you just don't feel like, you just want to verify that what you're having me do or what you're telling me is like, if I ask somebody else, are they going to tell me the same thing?
Right.
And so it's okay to get a second opinion, especially if you don't feel like trusting your instinct. If you don't feel like
Mm-hmm.
what they're telling you is right, or if they're telling you that this pain or this symptom is normal, it's normal, but like Tiffany said, your body. If this is something that was wasn't there last week and
Mm-hmm.
now it's happening consistently for a week and it's a change, then you
Mm-hmm.
just need to be willing to say, you know what, I'm going to ask somebody else, or I'm just going to keep pressuring you until you do the test, or ask specifically for it. Sometimes too, it can be hard
Mm-hmm.
finding different clinicians, especially in OB. There are hundreds of
Mm-hmm.
thousands of different gynecologists, OBs around, but I know from just my own experience, sometimes if you get certain, like past a certain point in your pregnancy, no other provider is going to be willing to take you at that point. It's hard
Mm-hmm.
to find, like, I'm not, to transfer at 37 weeks because you're due in 3 weeks and you've been with this doctor this whole time. They're going to want
Mm-hmm.
your records before they see you. They're going to want all of these things. So it can be hard even to get an appointment. And so just kind of making sure that you are willing to, like, if you can't get in with a different doctor, then you just need to be forceful. And I think one of the new things too, that I didn't mention too, like doulas, having just that advocate with you
Mm-hmm.
in the room, is so important, especially for Black women, because sometimes
Right.
it can be intimidating. Or if you
Mm-hmm.
feel like, I don't know if this is every Black woman's experience, but it comes to a point where, if I've said something and I feel like I'm constantly not being heard, eventually you kind of just give up at a point where it's like, I'm not
Right.
going to keep beating this dead horse. You haven't heard me, fine, whatever. But sometimes just having somebody else there who is just specifically there for you, your advocate, and can validate what you're saying, it kind of helps empower you as well. And so
Mm-hmm.
kind of using all those other aspects when you're looking for a provider, and just knowing like you do have options if you don't feel that you're being heard, you're not getting the care you want. You can
Mm-hmm.
fire your doctor. You can fire your doctor in the delivery room.
Mm.
You can fire the nurse if the nurse is being disrespectful, or if the nurse isn't seeing you as a person or treating you as a person, or if you just don't feel that they're caring for you or they're making mistakes. You can say,
Mm-hmm.
I do not want you as a nurse. Same thing
Mm-hmm.
with your loved ones. If you're in
Mm.
there with your loved one and you see that the nurse is using, just being like, you're dealing with microaggressions or not being heard, you can say, I do not want you to care for my loved one. And just being willing to kind of
Mm-hmm.
stand up for yourself and for your loved ones in that role,
Mm-hmm.
is crucial too for us getting the care that we need if our provider, if we can't find one that looks like
It's
us.
not
Because
giving.
I mean, let's
Yeah.
be real, there's definitely a shortage of
Right.
Black doctors, Black mental health therapists, Black PAs, Black nurse practitioners,
Especially in certain places.
midwives. Oh
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And so that also contributes to that burnout, because there's only a handful of us,
Mm-hmm.
caring for a large amount of population, a large population of our people. So, um,
Right.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because I went to this women's like center. Because I was just kind of wanting to check on different things, and I'm just like, can you guys check this? And I want to, have someone do a what is it, like an ultrasound, to check, check my ovaries, check these things, because eventually I want to have, a child or children, but a child for sure. And so I got the most terrible care. And I was just like, is this a joke? Like, am I being pumped? It was so crazy. Now, there was a couple of people who were good, but there was the doctor, and then there was not her partner. She was under her. She was her nurse, but it seemed like she was bossing the doctor around, and I didn't really like it. Like, it was really busy, so I feel like they were like overbooked because they were kind of bouncing around, from room to room, and I'm just like, you need to finish with me, before you go anywhere else. But it was just terrible. And then when she told me that, I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was something that she says, well, we'll check this, and if there's an issue, then we're going to do this procedure. But my blood pressure was really high, and it was like during the pandemic, and so I don't know, something happened during the pandemic where my blood pressure just shot up, and it was just up and stuck for a minute. I was like, okay, I don't know what's going on. But so they were like, okay, well, you need to, get on some blood pressure medication or whatnot. But in that procedure, they were just like, well, if your blood pressure is so high, we'll have to put you to sleep. And so they were going over all this stuff. And so I'm like, well, tell me more, because, I would hate for me to, be asleep and like none of my family's out here, and I wake up and then I don't have a uterus, or, something like that. And the lady goes, well, that actually, it can happen. She's like, if there's something, often, we see something and we have to go in, we will do that. Like, we will do the surgery, while you're out. And I was like, oh, no, you won't. And so I said, we will be getting a second opinion if that, once these results come back, if there's, any issues. Thank God there wasn't. But I was just like, wow, like, I really felt like, I don't know, kind of like a scared child or something, like, and I didn't have anyone. And I was just like, okay, this can't happen. This can't happen. I'm gonna have to go and do my research and figure out what I need to do just in case. And so that's kind of what made me, research more, because I'm just like, I can't be put in that position and then, wake up and then not my world is over, but, I just don't want something to happen to me where I didn't have a say so in it. So, yes. So anyways, I'm just like, it's just so terrible that we have to go through this. I'm glad that we're having a discussion, and, we'll be able to kind of, direct, people, just even me with getting educated on it, be able to direct, folks that I know to the right people. So, yeah. So, Darlene, I wanted to, bring you onto this discussion to discuss kind of the route that you took as far as, care before you became a mother, and even during and after. Your little son is so cute. It's like so adorable.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So my background is all movement. I love movement. I treat my body like an instrument, but I also treat it as though it is my primary machine. And what I mean by that is, like, sure, using dumbbells and using, all the workout equipment is nice, but if you don't have your body, you can't use any of that stuff, right? So I make sure that that is my number one tool. So even when I found out that I was pregnant, I worked out I exercised during my first trimester, second trimester, third trimester. I was already in movement. I just modified it and customized the program that would be specific to my needs, leading up to 40 weeks. And I do want to say that, Jolana, something that you touched on just in regards to advocacy for my doula. Just, I cannot stress enough how much, like, my doula was there for me, just really, really tapping into watching what workouts I was doing. Does this feel right? Does this feel okay? Because sometimes, it's my first pregnancy, having that second person in the room just to kind of be an ear and making sure that my body felt safe, making sure that anything that I was doing physical felt right on me, was such a joy to have. And yeah, I just can't stress that enough, that I feel like more Black women need to specifically have that doula care is just top tier, like everything. So yeah, I worked out the entire time. I made sure that I was hydrated the entire time. And more importantly, just continuing to stay educated. Something that Whitney talked about that I really enjoyed hearing is just the disparity around the lack of resources, the lack of knowledge when it comes to postpartum care. So for example, my doula, she informed me, and my midwife actually informed me of what diastasis recti is, and the fact that, okay, you're pregnant now, so your abs are going to 90% like chance they're going to separate. And that's what diastasis recti is. And what I learned is that even in my postpartum care is that many Black women didn't know about this. I knew a little bit about it. I didn't have a lot
scary.
of knowledge. Sorry?
I said, it sounds scary. Please.
Not so scary. So you have the linea alba that goes down your belly. So most times when a woman becomes pregnant, that line is that vertical line that goes down your belly. It darkens. And this line is then the linea alba. And essentially your uterus is pushing out. And because of the baby growing, because everything is, your ligaments are stretching, everything is kind of making room for baby, your six-pack abs are separating. So they're stitched together very tight along that linea alba. And what ends up happening is over time, they stretch out, right? And sometimes I would say about 80% of women, which is pretty high, 80% of women will recover within the first 3 months of postpartum care. And meaning that that gap will then kind of stitch its way back within 3 months. But then you have the 20% or sometimes higher than that, that have diastasis recti and need proper and specific healing, right? So what ends up happening is you have women that feel like, okay, it's 3 months postpartum. I feel like I can move again. I can kind of like get into the gym. So what do they start doing? They start doing crunches. They start doing plank, like all of these exercises that are actually going to make your diastasis recti worse, right? And so when I talk to my clients now, a lot of them, we backtrack and I say, oh, you have kids. Okay, let me test to see if you actually have diastasis recti, because if you do, we have to customize a program that's completely different so that we can heal your core, your deep muscle tissues first and foremost, right? So I became really passionate about this. And as soon as my doula had this conversation with me about diastasis recti, because I had prolonged diastasis recti, even after 3 months, I still had a separation in my abdomen. We kind of sat down together and just informed me of all the exercises and the different things that I would have to do to be able to really heal myself. I went to physical therapy, which I feel like a lot of, which is also a shortage. There's not a lot of Black physical therapists. And there's also not, I think, a lot of avenues and resources. Health insurance sometimes doesn't cover for physical therapy unless you have like a hernia after giving birth. So yeah, these are just things that I became really passionate about, because I realized that it's such a question mark when it comes to what you're supposed to do as far as healing your body after you have a baby.
Wow, that just blew my mind. I was like, what? Maybe because I don't have abs. Good to know. Good to know. Oh, okay. So Tiffany and Whitney, I wanted to kind of, touch on what you guys do. You all focus on maternal, prenatal mental health services. And I personally never heard of that, before. And I was just thinking about, the different topics that I've had on the show as we've talked about mental health in the Black community, and how like it's a high percentage of our community that have mental illness, and over 50%. that it's undetected and untreated. So, um, I loved everything, that I've learned about you guys this far, but I wanted to kind of, touch on that. The services that you guys provide. How exactly are you guys, I guess, making the difference in the community? Because I know that you guys are, but if you could kind of tell people exactly like what it is that you guys do and what improvements that you guys have seen in the time that you guys have had raising resilience. Yes, Whitney. So the senior me.
So yeah, I think one of the things is first the education. Because coming into this, I think a lot of people just hear postpartum. And me and Tiffany have to educate people. So postpartum is the period after birth, but postpartum depression is the actual mental health concern or challenge. Because a lot of times women will just say, "Oh, I had postpartum." That's the period. So I like to be able to navigate using that correct language, because if you're going to use that language, people may overlook it to think, oh, well, what is the difference? And me and Tiffany first are like, okay, what's the education around it? We just first started doing workshops. We have our nonprofit, and that was just free workshops for women to learn around what PMADS is. So PMADS is perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. So when you hear that, it's like, what is that? So we like to provide women education around what's postpartum depression, what's postpartum rage, what's postpartum anxiety, postpartum bipolar 1 and 2, postpartum psychosis, because a lot of times people think that postpartum depression is postpartum psychosis, and they tend to think, oh, if you have postpartum depression, you're going to harm your children or you're going to harm your baby. And that is a complete two different things. So, and postpartum anxiety is also more common than postpartum depression. And so we also want to inform women that these things can happen during pregnancy and after pregnancy. It's not just post-birth as well. And I think another big thing is like not only providing the education, but understanding that the work we do is not just for women that are pregnant and postpartum. We work with women that have had an infant loss. Everyone doesn't come home with a baby. We support women through their home births, infertility, women that are struggling to even have children or thinking about having children, because your maternal mental health starts even before you have children. Because if you don't have the information, it's so hard to navigate when you're stuck in a moment. We get women in crisis. So it's so hard to know, okay, where do I turn now? What do I need now? And also working with couples. So a lot of times we don't think about what is it like for your partner to have to notice and understand what it's like when you're going through your own stuff and they are, and even the parenting aspect. How do we parent together during this whole time and you're in this postpartum period, even breastfeeding, like navigating through that, and it's your first time when you have no one else in your family that has ever done this before, cannot support you. There are so many things of maternal mental health that people don't even think of, like sex and intimacy. No one thinks about like, okay, what does that look like? And we just had a baby. So I think for me and Tiffany, it's the education, is how to get your resources. Where do you look for a pelvic floor therapist, resources, and also how to navigate through it and where to look for the help. So me and Tiffany try to meet women where they're at and make sure they get the support they need, not only mental health wise, but all of the things that's needed during that period.
Thank you. Um, so I know that you guys work with them when they come to you while they're pregnant, and after their pregnancy. And are you all doing work with them before? Like, do women who are planning, hey, I want to start planning, do prayer planning and have a baby, at the end of the year, be pregnant by the end of the year. Or do you guys offer those services beforehand, as well, Tiffany? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we do. Like we have women, because you have to think we work with primarily Black women, so there's a lot of fear around birth. So
Okay.
we
So they're
already
coming
come
in
into
before.
thinking about like, okay, is it when you see birth depicted with Black women, it's either death or it's going to be painful. So we have women that have fertility issues, fibroid issues, even women that have no reproductive issues, and they're like, okay, I need to work through my anxiety around getting pregnant. I need to work through my anxiety of, okay, what are these fears around giving birth and I may not make it? So they come in for an assessment. We work through it, a treatment plan, kind of work through where they would like to be, work through some, even women have trauma. Like we have trauma,
Yeah.
sexual trauma, physical trauma, even finding a partner. I have a client now who is navigating birth by herself. Like she is going through fertility and everything to find a sperm donor, and she's doing this by herself. So that looks very different for her to navigate. Like parenthood is going to look different for me, and how I navigate it. So we meet women throughout the lifespan, whether women that are over 40 that are thinking about having their first baby, women doing it alone, women doing it together. So women do come to us even before they have children, working on some mental health things needed to have a good, successful birth.
I think that is so amazing, because just going back to the stats with that those high rates of mental illness within our community, just imagine if there were more of y'all working with, Black women, before and during and after, like how much better would some of these childhoods of some of these people, that we know, or, just the stories that we hear about, would their lives be, if their mother was able to get that kind of, care before. Because just like you said, there's so many different, ways, to become a mom. And those, especially who are doing it by themselves, you need a whole different type of support, and then how is that going to affect you? You might think like, yeah, I'm going to do this by myself. So what? If I can't find a man, I am in a good position. I make money. I am, stable. I can do this. And then they have the baby, and then they're going through all these different things. And it's just like all the stuff that they didn't know. That was just going to kind of just hit them like a ton of bricks. Oh, she said fibroids are no joy. Absolutely. Yeah, that really affects our, community, and with PCOS and stuff, just different things too that are more prone, in our community than others. Yeah, it's critical to have that support.
I agree. And V, I even think like some of my clients, when we go through like just their therapy sessions, like the thought of like, I'm entering 35 and I need to freeze my eggs. Like it's a very expensive process. And what that takes on your mental health, thinking about like, that's not even offered to a lot of Black women to even know what it's like to navigate that process of freezing your eggs, just so you can have a child. If you want to think about it later on down the road, like that process and just IVF is just not as accessible to us as it is our white counterparts. And that plays on your mental health. It's a constant kind of timeline ticking about when are you going to have children? What does this look like for you? Like that plays onto your mental health too. And that's maternal mental health.
Right. Or even with the changing, like you were saying, people be throwing that freeze your eggs like you just rich. Like, oh yeah, well, I'll just freeze my eggs. It's like, I work a regular job like you. Like, what are you saying? Like, where I'm getting these 10 G's, each time, or just whatever, like whatever the process is. And sometimes, a lot of times, you may have great health insurance that will cover and help. But if you're not getting educated, your doctor is not really, trying to, I guess, let you know what resources are available. That's why it's so important to be that, advocate for yourself, so that you can figure out, if I do want to be a mom, like what can I do? Like, what are the things? Because all you can do is what you can do, but you can, a big part of it is just educating yourself. And so, yeah, but when they just throw that, they're like, oh, you can just freeze your eggs. It's like, okay. But also I have been hearing, different things about people becoming mothers much later. My sister was telling me about one of her friends. I forget what she does, but she basically works with the fertility, specialist, or she may be that. I can't remember what her title is. But anyway, her clients range all the way to 54. And I'm like, what? But I met a lady who has twin boys, and she got pregnant at 50. She had two daughters, and they were grown, and she was going to her last daughter's graduation from college, and she thought she had the flu. And so she comes back home, and she went to see her doctor, and he says, you're pregnant with twins. And she's like, what? What are you saying? She's like, God has a sense of humor, honey. And I was just like, right, for you to get them twin boys at the end, at that age, that's a lot. So, but I mean, it's amazing, but we know that's not, I don't really know. Like, I know that I had heard there was an article some years ago, and they were just saying that 35 is no longer a geriatric pregnancy. And so, but I haven't heard too much about it. And so I'm just like, well, I mean, I guess got a few more years to get this thing going. So.
I think the doctors might still, as far as like terminology, they might still consider it geriatric pregnancy. But yes, women are definitely having children later because they are more focused on their careers. And I think too, a part of everything that we shared about the work that we do, a lot of times we see clients who come in, and especially with Black women, because we have this, there's this like concept of being a strong Black woman, right? And especially being a mother, you are just supposed to innately know what to do and how to navigate this time and this transition. And that's not necessarily true. And so it's not true at all. And so when these women are thrown into motherhood, with the expectation that, you're supposed to know how to do it, you should be able to do it on your own, you don't need a support system, it really rocks their world. And instead of them thinking like, I'm struggling, or I have anxiety, or I have depression, they really just think that they're failing, like they are failing at motherhood. And so we have to have so many conversation of processing like their expectations versus society's expectations, what society says a mother looks like and what that means, and being able for them to know that you get to define what motherhood looks like for you. And it might not look like what you see in the magazine, and it might not look like what you see on Instagram, or in the media. You get to define what this means, and really understanding that what it looks like to do their best, and knowing that their best is going to look different each day. Right? Like there is no such thing as being a perfect mother. And a lot of times we show up in parenthood, like what you were saying about, we're thinking about how many people we know, if their mother would have gotten the care that, we provide, how their lives would have turned out differently. And our parenting experiences are like really rooted in how we were parented. And so even if we can recognize that the way we were parented wasn't the best way or wasn't the most effective or healthy way, there's still some things that we have to work through as we become parents, because that triggers us. It reminds us of those things, and we have to really make a conscious decision of, do I want to repeat these patterns, or do I want to do something different? And both is hard, right? Like both of those decisions are hard, and really having to work with mental health providers that can really help them navigate that situation by giving themselves grace and the education that we provide. And also Whitney touched on too about how we coordinate care outside of mental health services. What Darlene was saying about her going to see the physical therapist, right? Like through our workshops that we host through our nonprofit, we connect these women with pelvic floor therapists, with lactation specialists, sleep specialists, right? Like sleep is such a heavy and huge concern when women are having babies. We've worked with like nutritionists, dietitians, and personal trainers. I know someone mentioned that no one really tells you about the changes that your body will go through once you have a baby. And so like we know that mental health is not just like this isolated thing in this box over here, right? It impacts every single aspect of our lives. If we are struggling physically, 9 times out of 10, we're struggling mentally, and vice versa. And so it's really important for Whitney and I to be able to coordinate with care across the board. Like we specialize in maternal mental health, but that's maternal health care. Like that's included. And so I think it's really important. And unfortunately, sometimes in the maternal care like conversation, mental health is left out of that. And it is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yes, you're right. Miss Kelly, I seen what you had put that, you can define motherhood because all of our kids are different, for sure, dealing with different personalities. Yeah, I think that's so true, too, because I do see that with a lot of parents or they try and raise their kids the same, and it's just like it's impossible. And I don't know if you guys seen on Instagram or social media, this guy, I don't know if he was a where he was. It was a well, anyways, the interviewing, and the lady was asking him if one child, like child's is the same, and they were just talking about no, because the parents, if you have siblings, right, your parents were a different age when they had that sibling. They might have had different resources when they had that sibling. You have this personality, and your brother or your sister has this personality, so that interacting with your parent, it's going to be different because they got their personality, and you know how that goes. Your parents be like, what I say goes, and there's some, even though our parents will say, no one's my favorite, they lie. No. But there's some, I don't know if it's necessarily the favorite, but it's more so about the ease probably of raising, that particular child. And that's what my mom says, whatever one is making it easier for me in the moment is my favorite. And so I'm like, right. But so it's like one situation is not going to be the same. And so, define, as to your point, Miss Kelly, is that, you probably redefine motherhood, with each child, or even if you have, get to a point where you have to take in some children, or adopt, or, family members needs help, you're constantly redefining it. I was speaking to someone today, and I said that as long as you are learning, you're constantly changing. That, like, you may change more frequent than you would expect, yourself to, because you're, serial learner. So yeah. But let's see here. We have no more questions, but I did want us to, for each of you all, if you wanted to share any last bit of advice, as far as, looking for healthcare providers in general, but in regards of, also to preparing for motherhood. So if you guys have any advice that you would like to share, we can start first with Darlene, if you have anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So I definitely want to say that I think whether a mother is deciding, or someone that will be a mother in the future,
Mm-hmm.
it's so important to, whether you decide to have a home birth, or whether you decide to have birth in a birthing center, whether your birth plan is to do it in a hospital, is to educate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think in all of those aspects, in all of those arenas, you have to advocate for your own knowledge. If you have the means to have a doula, by all means, have that voice of reason in the room for you, just in case something goes haywire, something goes wrong, you're not conscious, you're not in the right state of mind.
Mm-hmm.
You can have something documented with your doula to say, this is what she said in writing, this is what we need to stick to, whether you're sedated, whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how much just educating myself in this arena and having my home birth, how empowered I felt, how assured I felt of everyone in the room. And I don't know, admittedly, I don't know if I would have done all of those things if I decided to do it in a hospital. And that's how I feel, because I think sometimes, like as someone mentioned earlier in the show, there's like the power dynamic when it comes to a healthcare provider or your doctor and the patient. It's like, well, we're supposed to just lay down, spread our legs, and like you do your work and do what you do, but we don't ask any questions. And that's not how it should ever be, right, in the hospitals, or anywhere you decide. So my best advice is just to continue to educate yourself and be okay with like understanding that you are going to ask some hard questions. They'll be uncomfortable, but as Tiffany and Whitney mentioned before, it's like the providers that are for you are not going to make you feel uncomfortable for asking questions that may not be easy to ask, but they're necessary to ask. So.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, I'm laughing at Daryl, but so Jolana, did you have any last words of advice?
So just as far as preparing for motherhood, Tiffany and Whitney definitely touched crucial information on preparing mentally for motherhood. Just medically, I would definitely just recommend making sure that you are as healthy as you can be before you decide to
Mm,
conceive. I typically encourage starting prenatal vitamins at least 3 months before you're planning to conceive, just to make sure you have all of the folic acid, the nutrients on board ahead of time.
mhm.
Kind of working on correcting unhealthy habits. Exercise is definitely very important before
Yeah.
pregnancy as well. People with diabetes and, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, things like that, just making sure that you are physically at your best before you get pregnant to help
Mm,
improve your pregnancy outcomes, staying active throughout pregnancy and afterwards, just getting exercise, eating well, and just making sure that mentally, physically, spiritually, you are seeking out those things just to kind of heal yourself, educate yourself to be more aware of what is to come. And then, same thing like preparing with your provider, making sure that you are being heard, that you do have the opportunity to ask and answer and get your questions answered.
mhm.
It's very hard as a healthcare provider to always have the time, just because, like you said, sometimes you can feel rushed at your appointments just because of how our healthcare system is set up. um,
Mhm.
you know just insurance issues and things like that, but you do want to make sure that you are advocating for yourself, and that when you do have your 15 minutes with your provider, that you
Right.
are getting your full 15 minutes. So don't let them rush you out of your appointment time. If you have questions, then sometimes you might have to say, look, we just need to slow down so I can ask my questions,
Mhm.
because it is very important for me and for my health. All right.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Whitney, I know Whitney and Tiffany, you guys said so much. But whatever else you want to add, and maybe even to some of those resources for those individuals preparing for motherhood. I mean, I think you guys are a one-stop shop. Go ahead, Whitney or
I
Tiffany.
I would just say, be very flexible with your expectations, and
Mm,
also like developing a support system, whatever that looks like for you, right? Like
mm,
everyone's not afforded to have like a close knit family or family in close proximity, but thinking
mhm.
about like what your birthing team will look like, whether that is a doula, having a
Midwives.
midwife. Yeah,
Mhm.
I had a midwife for my second birth, and the experiences were two totally different experiences, the second
Mm,
one being better. So really building that care team of support people, because we were not meant to do this alone, no matter what
mhm.
the people, whoever the people are, whatever the people say, we're not meant to do this alone, and it definitely takes like a team and a village.
Absolutely. And then it's so interesting because I hear about midwives and doulas, and I always have been intrigued. I see more doulas, but for the people who don't really understand, what's the difference? Or do they just work together? Are they the same? Doulas, midwives? Go
So, a,
ahead.
oh, go ahead. No, Jolana, I think you wanted. So a midwife is licensed to give birth, or to actually facilitate in the birthing of the child, and a doula is there for more so like moral support, being able to
Oh,
provide you with resources,
okay.
whether you need like a lactation consultant, but they're not licensed to to just give birth
Deliver
to the
the
baby. They're there as
baby.
an extra supportive hands, especially if you're someone that's giving your birthing person who may not have family members around. You may not have like a sister or cousin, someone to be there as a second advocate and the support. There's also postpartum doulas who are there to ensure your safety and that you're feeling that the mother is feeling loved on and appreciated.
Mm.
My doula was also postpartum. She gave me like an awesome massage like the day after my birth, and it was just it was amazing experience. So yeah.
No, that's awesome. So that makes me think, yeah, the with what you all do, Tiffany and Whitney, that having those doulas is like it's kind of like they can work, hand in hand with that mental health piece, as well, because of that support, and a lot of times when we have mental health issues, we need a lot of support, that's huge. Whitney, did you have anything else to add to as far as the last words of advice in preparing for motherhood?
I just think one of the biggest things I think working specifically with what me and Tiffany do is like, I just want women to know you're not defined by your strength. Like, that's why we end up feeling tired, burnt out, not quality care. Like, that strength only holds us together for so long. So don't define your mental health or your physical health by your strength, because it just ends us up burnt out and depleted. Like, know when it's enough before you're depleted. Because without health, you may not get that chance, especially entering birth, thinking about birth. You may go into it with that strength, but not speaking up, thinking because you got to be a strong woman, that's not going to define the care you need. So I really think just navigating that and using resources like the Earth app and Health in your Hue to see providers in your area is so important. And don't mind getting somebody else to do it if you need them to. You can find and navigate power in your care. So don't navigate your health and mental health by your strength. It's not worth it. And we, as Black women, we don't have to wear that hat. Like, stop. We don't have to wear all of these different roles to get the care. So
Yes,
that's my last word.
Yes, we have to embrace some relaxation. We need it. It's just like, of course, a lot of times I think we feel so guilty because we think that we're supposed to do it all. We have to do it all. And it's just like, if you're not taking care of yourself, you won't be around to do, any of that. So, yeah. So I love that. Well, it's been such a great show. I want to give you guys an opportunity to just roundabout let the people know where they can, find you, and also anything that you have coming up that you would like to share, services that you provide. Just this is your opportunity to run it. So go ahead, Jolana. I'll have you take it first, and we'll go around.
All right. So yes, if you want to reach me, you can find me on Instagram. It's at Jolana_W. I'm on Facebook. It's just my name, Jolana Woodruff. And I'm really working on building up my social media presence, but that's not, I work and I've got my 3 kids and, extracurricular activities. So I'm not as out there as I need to be, but that's just a growth area. But yes, I do practice again in Fresno, California. And I am here if you guys just have any questions or support or just want to talk. So,
Absolutely. All right. Okay, so I think someone came off their mic. Go ahead, Whitney.
So as you know, me and Tiffany, we have our Instagram page where Tiffany shares wonderful information, such as upcoming events we have. We have our holding space session that we have monthly, where we allow Black women to come in and share their knowledge and just have a space where we can emotionally be safe and free. And we have different topics. Last month was centered around love and intimacy. This month will be around single motherhood and navigating that. Also, we have an amazing book coming out, which is guiding Black women how to navigate their perinatal period. So pregnancy and postpartum mental health lens. We have an ebook coming out. We have our YouTube series. So we just have a lot of wonderful and great resources coming out for raising resilience. And also we have a campaign going on right now, which is called Hear Our Voices, which advocates for Black women when it comes to their medical and mental health. So we're raising money to be able to allow more resources for Black women when it comes to their maternal mental health.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Awesome. And Darlene?
So you can find me and my community on Darlene Niara. I'm pretty heavy on the Instagram presence for sure. I have a book called Mask Off, How to Lead by Example Without Perfection. It has nothing to do with the pandemic. I actually wrote that book a few years ago. And it's just a self-help book, just speaking on leadership and just really stepping into the woman that you are designed to be. And I also have an 8-week postpartum course, our postnatal course that really helps women heal diastasis recti. So even if you don't have diastasis recti, it's still a safe program for women who are looking to get into exercise, but don't really know where to start soon after giving birth. So we go over pelvic floor exercises. We go over different things to be able to tap into the transversus abdominis. So I'm really passionate about that. And I also have a program that's specific for women that are expecting children and want to build their bodies.
Awesome. And Tiffany, did you have anything? Did Whitney miss anything?
Whitney covered it all.
Yes. Awesome. Well, that is the show, and I appreciate everyone for being here. Each and every one of you all wealth of knowledge. And I'm like, God, there's so much, to learn. And I just think that, for all of you guys, what you are providing, the services you provide, what you do on a daily basis, you are just awesome. You all are dope. And, your patients, they're lucky to have you. And just the people in your lives, because I'm sure y'all have family members that are like, hey, what do I do when this happens? We all know that. I work in human resources, outside of this, and every human resource question, people are like, you work in human resources, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay. Luckily, I know most of their, I can answer most of their questions. But I just thank you all so much, because you guys have just provided so much wonderful information. And I just wish you all the best in your, career and your passions, and just, hope that you guys just continue, that your, companies continue to blossom. And thank you again. And to the audience, thank you so much for being here again. We will have our last episode of Women's Healing next week, which is March 12th. And it's Live Free and Play Hard. We were talking about, the strong Black women. And so, you can play too as an adult. You can have fun and be silly and, contribute to your own wellness in different ways. So, and Darlene, she'll be back with us next week as well. So I'm excited about that show. And again, thank you. Until next time, see you.
Bye.